Welcome to Rubberband Live, the Australian recruitment and talent acquisition vodcast and podcast. I am Edan Haddock, your host and the creator of Rubberband, the recruitment network for all. Let's go live. And we are live. Welcome everyone out there to this episode of Rubberband Live, Candidate Experience in 2023, What Really Matters. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I live and work on, the Wadawurrung and Dja Dja Wurrung people. I recognise their continuing connection to the land and waterways. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I extend this to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Welcome, and I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by Rebecca Skilbeck from, Skilbeck. I've got nervous today. Rebecca Skilbeck from PageUp. How are you, Rebecca?
I'm really good, and thank you for having me. Lovely to be here today.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure, and I'm really excited to talk about the research that PageUp and yourself have conducted. But look, before we kick that off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career within the recruitment and talent industry?
So I came to it the long way round. So at the moment, there's a lot of discussion about how Gen Zs will have 5 careers and 17 different jobs across their lifetime. I haven't had 17 jobs, but I've actually had 5 very different careers. So I started my career as a molecular biologist looking at genetic regulation and loved the theory of it. Genetics is very, very interesting, but realized lab-based research wasn't for me. So I did a master's in management and I specialized in HR and industrial relations. So that's where my journey into HR started. Found it incredibly fascinating, and I did my thesis in psychological contract violation. And so organizational behavior and how the policies and practices that we put in place really shape the experience that our talent has. So this is back before we had that idea of it was an employee experience or candidate experience. We didn't have the words for it. So I then changed careers and I went out to management consulting, and I started in HR consulting looking at how to improve your performance management process internally, which then sort of morphed into organizational agility and structure. And then because of the time it went into right sizing, and then I found I didn't have that appetite for advising companies that they need to make their staff redundant. So then it's like, what is my next career? So from there, I went into equity research and I went to work with a large investment bank. So I did that for a number of years, and that's financial research. And then I got to the point of thinking about starting a family. And this is, again, topics that are very topical at the moment about work-life balance and flexibility. If you work for a large investment bank, they own you 13 hours a day, weekends as well, and there wasn't that balance. So then it's like, well, what can I do to get that work-life balance and that flexibility in terms of the hours I want to work and the projects I want to work on? So went back to doing project-based work in terms of both HR consulting and process efficiency and project management. And I was very lucky that PageUp approached me because they knew my background in terms of having the HR masters and consulting background to do a number of roles for them. And then that was a great relationship. And then a number of years ago, they asked me if I would come and work for them on a permanent basis. So slight shift. And now I sit within the product team in PageUp, and I look at market research and customer insights. So what is the future of HR? What are the trends that are shaping it? How do our customers use the system? What do they think about it? And so that's both from a data perspective, like how are they using the system? And then also those conversations with recruiters and HR talent acquisition professionals of like, this is what your data is showing. This is how you're using the system. What are the challenges that you're facing? What does this mean? And so that's where we are here now. So as I said, it's like a long way round to get to this.
What a fabulous career. I think we could have an entire episode talking about your career. That's incredible. But look, speaking of data, like I understand, PageUp have recently released a research report that you're responsible for, which is absolutely fascinating, which candidate experience in 2023, what really matters. Can you tell me, in terms of this research, how did you go about, I guess, collecting those data points? Tell me a little bit about what it all means.
So we started with doing an in-depth survey of nearly 200 job seekers to understand across the journey of a job seeker, from when you're first starting to think about, well, I need to apply for a new job, or I want a new job, right through the I've applied and I'm now in the process. What are the things that were really important to you, and how satisfied were you at each of those stages? And from that, we identified that the start of the candidate experience, or the job seeker experience, which was the pre-apply, the job search, and the application, we wanted to know more about that. So we then did a large study, and we got results from 185,000 candidates at the end of last year in October. It was huge.
It's huge.
And asked them around their job search and their application experience. And we then also, from those 185,000, 34,000 put in commentary. So then we had this huge qualitative piece that we then looked at analysing to say, well, what are the themes that are emerging in terms of the feedback that are then linking to your satisfaction of the search and the application steps?
Fantastic. And it's a fascinating read. I mean, I've read over the report, and there were some big surprises for me, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. But what I love is the report is really summarized into 3 key stages of that candidate journey. Would you be able to walk us through what those stages are and what they mean?
Yes. So when you're thinking of so it is candidate experience, and a number of organisations think your candidate experience starts after a candidate has submitted an application form. But it's their experience and their journey. So it starts for them when they start thinking about, well, maybe I want to change career like I did, what information do I need? So we looked at the stages that are happening before submitting, because we could see there wasn't a lot of research in that space. So we started with what we're calling the pre-apply, which is the research, when candidates are looking for that information on your organisation so that they are fully informed with all the information they need to decide whether or not they would like to work for you. And then the next stage, the second stage, is the search. So they're now proactively looking for a job. And then the third stage is, well, they found the job and now they're applying for it. And when they apply for it, what does that experience look like?
Right. Fantastic. Well, I'd love to go through all 3 of those stages at a deeper level. So let's start with that pre-apply kind of research stage that you identified. What has the data told us from 185,000?
It's a lot of it.
It's just blowing my mind. And what are some of those kind of actionable insights that have come out of that data? What should we be focusing on? Let's talk at that pre-apply research phase.
So what we are seeing is there is a real shift in job seeker expectations. Some of this has been driven by our experience over COVID. So we're really looking for purpose-based work, and we want to understand the work-life balance and flexible. And some of it is also being driven by, there is that shift in demographics. So Gen Z is coming into the workforce. They're much more socially aware. They're much more politically active. So what we did find was that for 80% of job seekers, they said it was very or extremely important to be empowered to make an informed decision by having crucial information at the beginning of the process. But only 36%, so just over a third, were satisfied that they had access to that information. So then it is, what is it that they're looking for? So there's a number of things. The topics they're interested in are the mission and the value of the organisation. So what's the purpose of this organisation? What are they striving to achieve? And how does that align to my personal schemata? It's becoming more important for individuals. The second is there's growing awareness around DEI, social issues, environmental issues, and also that shift towards well-being, personal well-being, burnouts on the increase, and purpose-based work. So that's the second thing that we could see that candidates are interested in. The third is obviously around flexible work arrangements. And by flexible work arrangements, we're talking about more than whether or not I could work at home or in the office, that hybrid where it's not just about where, but it's about when. So what are my hours? And also for some organisations, and we're seeing this too when we're speaking with our customers, if you have frontline workers, it might also be who am I working with? So it's, where, when, and who. And then rewards and benefits are obviously very important. And rewards is, if you think, your remuneration, but then also what are the benefits? And this is one of the take homes for our audience is in speaking with our customers, a lot of them are really showcasing the benefits of working here that are, say, non-monetary. And so that might be about the flexibility of the work. It's your future development. It is the ability to have work on interesting projects. And some of our customers are getting really creative in some of those benefits that they're offering because they can't necessarily compete on salary. And then the final one then, which I've touched on, is the development, the future career opportunities, internal mobility. So what we found was 74% of job seekers think that personal development is really important, but only 29% were satisfied that they could find out the correct information, the information that they were after on the website. Right. And 78% of them were saying, a meaningful commitment to DEI is really important at the start of the job process when I'm looking at what's on your website. So in terms of you asked, what are some of those actionable insights? We said job seekers are discerning. The information is readily available. They're not interested in the corporate spin. They want authentic content. Yeah. So, engage your current employees to help you with that employee-generated content to put on your real-life stories. It's incredibly important from a DEI perspective because people want to understand what could my career look like with you? Is there representation of people like me in the stories that you're showcasing on your website? So really key to make sure it's being, really authentic. Other things that I would say is where you can, having dedicated landing sites for specific types of special interests such as DEI, STEM, graduate programs. We had that a fair bit, I'm a graduate and they couldn't find the information that they needed. And these are, young people, it might be their first foray into job search, and they've hit your website and they can't find out if you've got a graduate program. Wow. So those sort of things are really important. As employee stories are important as well. And the other thing, information on the recruitment process. What can they expect to happen? What are the steps? And who do they contact if they can't find what they need or they're concerned about the next step?
I see that a lot. I see a lot of frustration around that, even within my community, the Rubberband community, where, talent professionals are applying for roles, but they don't know who to contact. They don't know what the next stages are. Quite often they haven't heard for weeks and they don't know, hey, am I still in the running? I think it's something that we more often than not, we miss. For some reason, we don't highlight what is next. It's okay. I think we're getting better and better at keeping candidates informed on the journey, but we don't tell them upfront what to expect.
Upfront. Yeah, it's it can be really simple. It is we will come back to you in, within a week or 2 weeks. And then, the next stages are interview. And then after that, just something very simple in terms of what are the timeline and the steps, makes 100%. A difference.
It does make a difference. And it's a quick win. It's not a hard thing to do. And I agree. I think people being, attracted to organizations with, flexibility, 100%, and, strong commitment to diversity, inclusion, and equity, and, strong commitment to social responsibility. But you can't just put a blanket statement out there. You need
it needs to be authentic.
Exactly, because people can see through it. We're getting more and more savvy. It doesn't take us long to research a let's have a look at the senior leadership team and the executive structure. And if there's no diversity there, hey, guess what? You're not committed to diversity and inclusion and equity.
Yes,
So,
and it is, and people are posting to LinkedIn and to Glassdoor. Like, you can hit social media and see if there's any disconnect between the corporate spin and the reality. So it's embrace that and get your employees to be your brand ambassadors and showcase their personal stories.
Agreed.
I find that resonates really well.
Absolutely. Well, let's move through to stage 2 of the report, and this is around the job search. So tell me about the findings in terms of the job search. And again, let's talk about some actionable insights.
So the other piece I should add, so I mentioned at the start that we also look at how all of our customers are using the system, and from that, all of that research, we do track the channels which have the highest volume of applications. So we know that if an application is submitted, which channel it's come through. So probably worth just touching on that first. So 39% are coming through job boards, 15% through social media. So, for example, LinkedIn, and 18% through career site. So your career site is really important, because when you look at the conversion of these applicants into hires, the channel that has the best conversion of those 3 is your career site. So 11% of hires come through those applications that were submitted by the career site, which means 1 in 23 applicants are hired who are coming by your career site. So it's really important that that individuals can find the roles on your career site. So what we found was what impacted during the job search was the structure, the design, and the layout of the career site. Now, this seems really obvious, but it was from feedback. Sometimes it was, I can't find the login system section, or I can't find the search section, or how am I navigating, or I wanted to find specific information. So graduate is a great example about that. The second thing was around the quality and the type of filters that people could filter their search down to. And we found that there was actually a difference between males and females in terms of what was most important. So in terms of impacting satisfaction, the number 1 search requirement for males was what we would term a central requirement. So that was experience, background, qualifications, degree, certification, education. Whereas for females, it was job level. So that was more about the grade, the classification, whether it was a manager, a non-manager, or supervisor. Now, these were important to both genders, and location came up a lot as well. So that's, is this hybrid? But also geography, like whereabouts is it? So that's really important to get that right. The second one was around what's in the job ads. So you've used your filters, you found the jobs you're interested in, and then you're opening them up. And then this is around making sure that individuals have the information that they want at the start. So what we found was, from our research, 78% of job seekers said that it was very or extremely important to validate the job was worth pursuing before they began the application. But only 33% were satisfied. So what were they looking for? It was the specific job requirements, a clear job title. So this one was, we got comments too about, there seems to be, corporate jargon or company jargon. So, making sure that you're using a title that people understand that that's the role that they're searching for. The other one was eligibility, documents required. Now, this was a big one, documents required, because people put in a lot of effort to, fill in the role. So they to fill in the application, and it causes a high level of frustration as you're trying to apply. You're suddenly like, oh, I don't have the following documents. So they wanted that listed in the job ad, and the other one was salary. So what we did find was, when we asked, this is one of the other key findings, was 81% agreed or strongly agreed that it was easy to search for the role on the career site. But that meant for 1 in 5 it wasn't. And so that meant for, so I want to just dive into that a little bit more,
Yeah,
because
love
this isn't individuals have come to the career site and they can't find the job because you currently don't have that open position. We asked them this question after they had submitted the application form. So they'd found the role and they've applied for it and they've hit submit. And then 1 in 5 weren't saying that it was really easy to find that role they just applied for. So, we talked about this huge volume of individuals who have filled in this survey. So that means 37,000 people in a 2-week period found it challenging to find the role they ended up applying for.
Wow. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, really. So these search filters are really important. And then really clear job descriptions are incredibly important. The other key finding, and this is one of these, takeaways of what people should be considering, is when we asked, 87% of job seekers said that they manually monitor websites to make sure they're not missing roles they're interested in. And we partnered with Talent Table last year, and they did some research, and they found within the Australian market, only 48% of companies had the ability to sign up for an automated job alert. Wow. So going back to this idea of, well, if the role wasn't there that they were looking for, they're on your website, they're interested. How are they then joining up to signing up to a talent community or to job alerts so that you don't miss that talent because they've already showed that they're interested in you? So that's, one of the things I'd say is really key that we would like to see, that, embrace technology and start using technology to support the candidate's experience so that there is a role and that ends up in their inbox of, hey, you're interested in this type of role and it's now available.
Absolutely. It's very interesting with talent communities as well, because we're seeing more and more organizations introducing talent communities. Auto alerts are great because the machines are doing it for you, right? They're sending out, the job alerts to your audience. But often with talent communities, they can become very dormant. So you're inviting people to come in, but quite often talent teams are letting it sit there and they're not effectively communicating with that audience. And from my opinion, it's to make sure that, when you're identifying those top talent or people that are, going to be future hires, you need to make sure that communication is
nurturing them.
Nurturing, absolutely. And it's hard to do because, talent teams are incredibly stretched, but it is in the long run investing that time, whether it's, half an hour a week to nurture that community could be all it takes.
Well, that's where, technology again can really help. So using recruitment marketing technology, so you can set up those automated nurture campaigns and you can see what sort of content an individual is engaging with. So, is it a blog? Is it a video? And then you can give them more of that type of content. So it becomes a personalized journey that you're automating. So it then frees up your time to have those more value-add conversations that when you're like, okay, I've now got a role and I would like to invite this person into an active recruitment cycle, and then I'll also just pick up the phone and call them because the nurturing has been done automatically, and I now have the time. Back in my day, so automate where possible, but you're right, it needs to be a personalized journey. You don't want that just everybody's getting the same stuff and it's quite stale. It needs to be much more personalized. So, and as we touched on before, the other one is as part of this search process, if they've found the role, what are the next steps? Making sure that information, so it's like have it in the career bit, have it in the search as well, as part of that.
It's not hard to pop it in your job ad, right? At the top of the funnel. It's not difficult. Remove the things like excellent communication skills or the ability to multitask and use that text to give your candidates the process of what's ahead.
And that's actually, we should expand on that a little bit more. I'm sure you've had this conversation as well, which is really identifying what are the skills and requirements for the role. Don't have that big long laundry list. So that requires the recruiter and the hiring manager having that conversation up front. So what does success look like in this role? And we are hearing that a lot when we're speaking with recruiters. The challenge at the moment, because we're in such critical skill shortage, and we can't find enough people with the requirements to match the salary that we have available. So going back and having that conversation with your hiring manager of like, well, what is a must have? What's a nice to have? And if we need to flex on any of these, which of them would you be willing for them to have less experience, because we can train them into the role, but then there has to be the structure in place to allow that training to occur. So yes, there's lots of different areas where you can work in terms of making your job ads actually ads. So think of it as marketing. It's like, you're trying to hook the individual. So why do they want to come and work for you? So linking back to those things we said before about, purpose-based work, and what's your mission and your purpose, what's your commitment to DEI. So really showcasing who you are as an organization.
It's so fascinating. I think the role of a recruiter, you've got HR and you've got marketing, and I feel like marketing is really taking over. We're becoming more and more like marketers. So I'm not saying we're becoming less like HR people, but that skill set, the importance of it, is becoming more and more prevalent. So I think, advice for recruiters and talent acquisition professionals out there, you need to have that marketing hat on at all times, and you need to upskill and, work with your marketing team. They're there to support you. I think it's really, really important, and it's the future. It's what we're shifting to. But anyway, I'm getting off track. I want to hear about stage 3, which is the application. What has the data told us about the application stage? And how would we avoid losing candidates at that final hurdle? Really keen to hear.
So that's where I was going to start. That it's like you get to the application stage and you think you're home and hosed, and you are not, because we can see from that 19% of your potential applicants are lost at this stage. So they start the application and they don't submit it. And we can see that if you break that down in terms of how were they applying? Were they using a mobile device, or were they using a desktop? There's actually a larger discrepancy. So we do know that 32% of applications are submitted via a mobile device, and that is higher than it was last year. And if we go back to 2015, it was about 15%. So we have seen like a doubling, more than a doubling, in terms of the proportion that are coming in via a mobile device. And so what we do know is that more are submitted via a mobile device than are submitted via a desktop. So it's really, really critically important to understand what is the experience like doing it on a mobile device. So that's a take home for recruiters. If you haven't already, apply for a job on your job site using your mobile device and check out what is that experience like. Could it be improved? So the second thing I wanted to highlight that we found was when we asked job seekers, 53% said it was very or extremely important to minimise the amount of time they spent filling in an application form, but only 31% was satisfied with the amount of time that they had to invest in filling in those forms. When we asked in the really large study about, how satisfied are you with your filling in of the form, 85% said they agreed or strongly agreed that it was convenient and straightforward. But again, because we're looking at such a large set, that means over 14,000 people weren't, agreeing or strongly agreeing with that statement. So it's like, what can you do to improve that? And so when we were looking at, what was going on, what was the impact, we found that key, and this was a surprise to me. It wasn't around the number of questions or the length of the form. That's what I expected, and that was my hypothesis going in. It was actually the type of questions that were being asked and the ease of filling in those questions rather than the number or the length. So making sure that the questions are relevant to the role. A lot of feedback about being asked for information that wasn't relevant to the role or wasn't relevant to the stage. And so examples of that would be asking for my references when I'm filling in an application. People
agreed. Yeah. And it happens a lot.
People are uncomfortable about sharing personal information about somebody else, not themselves, at that stage. asking for passports or licenses at the application stage. So yeah, exactly. And so then in terms of the types of questions that were being asked, we did find that there was a difference between males and females. So the number one impact for males were whether or not the questions were perceived as straightforward and relevant. Whereas for females, the number one impact was if the questions were perceived as intrusive. So asking for, marital status without an understanding of why you need to know my marital status. So candidates are very open to the idea of us collecting DEI information if they understand the purpose as to why you're asking for that information and how it will be used. Whereas if there are these questions without context, then it's like, well, what do you need to know that? And also, how is that then playing against me? If I give you that information, is that then, you'll use that to perhaps knock me out? So that was one that we, were surprised, I guess, to say. It was in terms of those types of questions. So the relevance of the questions is really, really, really important. And if you ask questions that are pertinent to the role, that was actually perceived positively, because it was like, we got comments along the lines of, thank you for allowing me to showcase how my skills align to the requirements of the role. So we do understand that organisations want to understand whether or not your skills and experience fit the role. Candidates understand that as well, and they want to showcase. So that was, that was a good alignment. Whereas when we got out of alignment was if the questions were, they didn't understand the purpose or they were considered intrusive. And then the other one was if they were repetitive. So if you ask me for information that's in my resume and I type it in and then I pre-fill and it comes in incorrectly or out of order, and then I have to load up my resume as well, I'm like, why? Why am I doing the same step multiple times?
We've all been there. It's the old cut and paste, having to cut and paste your CV after you've already uploaded your CV. It's not good, is it?
No. So those were, so in terms of, I think we've probably covered it, but, make sure the questions are relevant to the role is sort of like the number one take home there. And then have a clear explanation of why you're collecting any DEI information. So I was thinking of an example, someone said, thank you for making these optional because I, admire that you're committed to DEI, but that it was optional made me feel more comfortable. And then, if you do have, where possible, allow them to pre-fill from social media. Like if they've already got a profile that's there, allow them to pull all that information in or just to apply with their, their social media profile. Like there are other ways to get this information rather than asking them to fill in a really long application form.
I find it really interesting because, I falsely assumed that people would, the less amount of information in terms of qualifying questions that they put in there, the better. So I automatically assumed that people would just want a quick apply where they send their CV and that's all they need to do. But I found it really interesting that people do want to answer relevant questions that will help them in their application process. They want to be sharing information as long as it's relevant and as long as it's contextual that will help them in that process. They don't mind taking the time to be able to input information that will help them. And I think that's really important advice for people out there, because we're moving more and more into automation, and just flicking a CV over a candidate, isn't necessarily...
How do I stand out?
Yeah, how do I stand out? Am I putting my best foot forward? Am I able to explain myself effectively in order to have the best chance of being selected for the role? Yeah.
And that's actually another finding that we should touch on, which was around salary. So there were being asked about salary expectations. They didn't like that. Like, please put that in the job ad, right? And then I'll select in or select out. But there was also some feedback around I'm looking to change careers, so asking me about my prior salary isn't relevant because I understand I'd need to go in on a lower basis. So there was no, and you're just asking for a number. I want to be able to explain to you why I'm looking to shift careers and, what my expectations are in this one. So yes, it is being able to stand out and then explain your personal story. But I should also say, quick is also good, because I did it myself as part of this research. I applied for some roles, and there was one where it pre-filled from my LinkedIn profile, and it was 10 pages. And I just had to hit next and check it all. I'm like, that was an awesome experience, because it was all correctly pulled in. So you want that information to be pre-filled accurately, and for some roles, it is appropriate to have a really quick apply, which is, here's my resume, and you can pull out the relevant information. And then for other roles, it is, appropriate to have more questions. And I think that is a key finding too. There's not a one size fits all for every type of role and for every type of organisation.
Yeah, of course. Look, it's really fascinating. Tell me, from your perspective, what surprised you the most? From gathering these insights, did anything stand out as being particularly surprising for you?
So the one that was really surprising was around, it wasn't the number of questions or the length, it was the type of question, because I hadn't, as I said, my hypothesis was it would be the length of the form, and if I had to fill in lots of questions, and that just didn't pan out at all. It was, what are you asking me, and how easy is it for me to provide that information to you, and does it make sense? Then also on search, the one that was a surprise for me was around the role clarity in terms of the role title. So I shouldn't have been surprised, because we do get a bit creative sometimes in terms of the type of what we're saying the title of the role is, but that confused candidates. They couldn't find the role that they were looking for. So that was the other standout for me, in terms of making sure you're great to be creative, but if your candidates or your job seekers can't find the role, then you're narrowing your field. And then the other surprise was from the job seeker research of people having to monitor, because our technology has the ability to sign up for job alerts. So I just assumed that was standard technology. And so then when we were asking people who weren't using our technology and they were having this different experience, I was it's that thing of, when you're using something all the time, you just assume that that's the technology that everybody else has access to, and not necessarily. And that obviously a lot of organisations aren't as automated as they could be, or they're not taking advantage of all of the functionality. That was one of the surprises too, was the variation in the responses, which shows that even though they're using the same technology, that organisations, in terms of the filters they choose to put in search, the content they choose to put on their website, and the questions and the length and the type of pre-fill that they're enabling in the application form, makes a big difference in the candidate experience. So it's not just about the technology. Technology is an enabler. It is also about the individual processes that organisations are using.
I find it really interesting around job titles too, and it's something I've been guilty of, being a little bit too creative with them in the past. But you might be looking for a talent acquisition consultant, but you pop up talent ninja or whatever it might be. We see all these.
It's a great example. Yeah.
Not everyone uses filters when they're searching for a role. People search for job titles and they can't find you. So it's so straightforward. And I think sometimes we get a little bit too carried away with trying to stand out, and then forgetting that trying to stand out means we're actually hiding the
narrowing role. You're narrowing it because I can't find it. So
yeah, really interesting. All right, well, we're coming into new financial year, so many talent teams and recruitment teams out there are going into their planning stages. They're having their team workshops. They're getting ready for the new financial year. So I would love for us to do, I guess, a very quick stop, start, continue activity. Based on the report, what do you think talent and recruitment teams should stop doing, start doing, and continue to do right now as they're kicking off?
So when you first gave me this question, I was like, oh yeah, I work in a software company. We do that all the time. Stop, start, continue. What happened in the last project that we did? Let's reflect on the last quarter. And then when I was looking at this, and the variation that we saw in the results shows that, some companies are, say, absolutely nailing it on the application form because we got really positive feedback, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're nailing it on the job search or in the pre-apply bit where people are researching your organisation on your career website. So thinking about this more broadly, I would say for stop, it's like, don't make assumptions. Don't assume that your candidate experience is as good as it could be and that it is equally positive across those 3 stages of the pre-apply and research, the search for a job, and then apply for the role. So going into my start, what I would say you should start doing, if you haven't already, is pretend that you're a job seeker and go through those stages on your career website. So research your company. Can you find all the information that you think that you would need to decide whether or not this company is in alignment with your, personal schemata in terms of values and mission, and are they providing the type of work in terms of purpose-led work for you? Are they showcasing their DE&I? And then also go through the search and the apply. And do it from both a mobile device and a desktop. So in terms of, that stat I was trying to, it's come back to mind. So 28% of applications are submitted via a mobile device, 13% by a desktop. So there's quite a variation there. So we're seeing, in terms of the ones that were lost at that stage. So 28% of mobile are lost, 13% of desktop are lost. So desktop experience is better. It's more forgiving. So make sure you're looking at it via the mobile. The other thing I would say you should start doing is have a look at your competitors. What are they doing? Do a bit of research yourself. Have a look at, what does better practice look like? What can I learn from others? And then go wider again of what are organisations who are winning, the career side awards, what sort of information are they putting out there and on their career side? What's their experience look like? The third thing I would say in terms of starting, if you're not doing, is making sure you are using the technology to its full advantage. So we just flagged the idea of having, job alerts and talent communities. We also discussed before the idea of having recruitment marketing. So how can technology support you? And then the fourth one I would say is I've got all this information because we asked for the feedback. If you're not doing it already, ask your applicants about their feedback. Do your own candidate experience research. What worked for them, what didn't work for them, because that arms you with the information going into the new financial year to say, well, how do I need to adjust my strategy? And in what aspects? So then in terms of continue, this is one of those things I would say, iterate, monitor and iterate and change as you need to. So understand what your strengths are, because you will already have strengths. So what are they? Continue to do those. And then what are the gaps? And then what are we doing to close those? And then monitor and iterate.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think, treat your team planning days, start those days as a CX workshop. Apply for your roles through multiple devices, invite people from outside of your team to come in and apply for those roles and really listen to that experience. It's interesting as well in terms of competitor analysis. I remember a couple of years ago in Melbourne, a community of us working in talent acquisition roles, we all got together in a room and we applied for each other's roles and provided feedback to each other. And we just did that as a community, but something very easy to do with your peers and you'll be amazed, because sometimes we have the blinkers on and we're so into our own experience, and just getting that outside perception. And of course, listen to your candidates. If you're not already surveying your candidates on their experience or talking to them throughout that process of what that experience looks like, that would be my number one start. Data. And that's why this report's awesome. It's there for us.
Your idea of getting somebody else that you trust to apply for a role, I think that's a really great idea, because it is, you're right, you have your own you're used to your technology as well and your process. So you might not understand that that's a bit of a quirky way to do it, because that's how we've always done it. It's like, any technology we use. I was just joking with the product team yesterday about, like, when things are moved around on screen to make it more intuitive. And it might be if it's somebody looking at it for the first time, but if you've looked at it 10,000 times and something suddenly moves, and then like, oh, I can't find it. So getting somebody who is unfamiliar with it to look at it, who will give you that honest feedback, that's great advice, Eden. I would be like, I'm going to move that to the top of my list. Find someone you trust that's up here to do it for you.
Oh, for sure. And you can even go one step further, because, quite often talent teams are saying we don't get investment, we don't get buy-in from the business. The people to ask to do it, ask your CEO to do it, ask
that's
your head of
to
do it, your chief marketing officer. It's whoever's at the front line of experience, candidate, customer experience within your organization. Those are the people, because if they see that there are areas that need improvement, and if they see there's a misalignment between candidate and customer, there's your investment.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's a really good point too, about why I'm so passionate about the candidate experience is candidates are sometimes customers. So if they have that bad experience at the start, you're not only losing a candidate, you're potentially losing a customer. And we have spoken to candidates, and that's what they say, like, they will then boycott a brand because they had a bad experience. And the other thing that, we know is if you have a bad experience, you tell people. Like 69% of candidates who have had a bad experience, they tell others. And if they have a good experience, even if they don't get a role, they will tell others that they had a positive experience. So, and then they will apply again in the future. So, really important to be thinking about that as well.
Absolutely. And asking that question, has this experience, has it changed your opinion of us from a consumer perspective or from a customer perspective? 100%. And again, that data and providing that insight higher up into the organization, if they see that it's impacting customer experience, there's your investment and your buy-in. Absolutely. Well, look, I think that's a great way to end today. I think that's a great piece of final advice. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us in the Rubberband community today to talk us through the report, the candidate experience in 2023, what really matters. Now, I will be sharing the report on the Rubberband LinkedIn page. Anyone out there who's not following, please do. But it is also available on the PageUp LinkedIn page as well. It is a fascinating read. Please give it a download. And Rebecca, thanks again. It's been an absolute pleasure today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks again.